Hey Optimancers, Chris here. I've been making some videos on how to make characters that focus on mounted combat. In my last video, I presented a build that was basically a knight in shining armor, using the Find Steed spell with the Share Spells feature to make a mount that was durable and allowed us to make the most out of our mounted combatant feat, as well as the lance. Today I'm going to present a build that focuses on the Find Greater Steed spell. But since Find Greater Steed is a 4th level paladin spell, it's basically unavoidable to have this character focus on mounted combat much later in their progression. The idea here is to be kind of a more conventional build and then steer it into mounted combat once we can make the most of it. Once we mount up, we're going to make a big bang. I present the Night Rojan Bomb. Hi, if you like this content and you would be interested in supporting it, you can do so through Patreon. A link to my Patreon page is in the video description. Today I'd like to thank these top level patrons: Nick Simmons, PCZ, Pedro de Vaca, Prometheo NTG, Ramen Goblin, Rohit, RVSP66, Rizquai, Sajan Abraham, Sam S, Scott Dunnington, Scott Shields, Stephen Edmondson, Steve Bouvel, TUM, Tazel, Thomas Barrero, TomTom, Tristan Bello, Vu, Wesley Terpstra, Wick, Zachary Shapiro, Alex C, Hey Mr. Wonderful, Alexander Tinkov, Blue Wolf, and Brian Delgado. Thank you all so much for your support. Let's get started. Now, guess what? Like always, this is a feat-hungry build, so custom lineage, it just works the best here. If you are sick of custom lineage, I get it, me too, but this is the optimized choice. This build can still work with another race, so feel free to take the race of your choice, but you will be a bit behind for doing so. And we're going to get that free feat, and we want it to be the Fey Touched feat. We'll get a +1 to Charisma, and we'll pick up the Misty Step spell and one additional first level spell from the Divination or Enchantment schools. If Strixhaven is available, Silvery Barbs is a good choice. If Wildmount is available, Gift of Alacrity is a good choice. If neither are available, then Bless is a good choice. Solid buff, low cost. And then with the variable trait, I've gone ahead and taken Dark Vision, 60 feet. So let's move on to ability scores. We're going to put the +2 bonus into Charisma, so with Fey Touch that gets us to an 18 right off the bat, plus 14 Dexterity, 15 Constitution, and a 10 Wisdom. Strength and Intelligence are being dumped. And surprise, surprise, we are going to start with a level of Hexblade. I mean, listen, the ability to focus on Charisma, it's just really good. It's too good to pass up. So we got our Hexblade's Curse, once per short rest, 30-foot range. Pick a target as a bonus action and you get a bonus to damage against them equal to your proficiency bonus. You crit on a 19 or 20, and you regain a small number of hit points if the target dies. Then Hex Warrior. This gives us proficiency in medium armor and shields, and we can pick a weapon after a long rest, and that weapon will use our Charisma modifier for the hit rolls and damage instead of our Strength or Dexterity. The weapon can't have the two-handed property, and the lance does not have the two-handed property, so once we get Find Greater Steed, that will be our Hex weapon. Before then, pick, the D8 damage weapon of your choice. Longsword, battle axe, warhammer, whatever you like. We're going to start with 2 cantrips. We're going to take Eldritch Blast and Green Flame Blade. So Eldritch Blast creates a beam with 120-foot range, does a d10 force damage on a hit, and when it scales at 5th, 11th, and 17th level, you get an additional beam. This will give us a ranged option when we need it, though by no means will it be our preferred attack. And then Green Flame Blade. You cast with 1 action, you make a melee attack against a creature within 5 feet of you, and if you hit, another creature within 5 feet of the creature you attacked takes fire damage equal to our Charisma modifier. When this scales at levels 5, 11, and 17, both the initial target and the secondary target take an additional d8 of fire damage. Until we get extra attack, basically, you want to use Green Flame Blade whenever you can get an additional target. And at level 5 and 6, probably on pretty much every attack. There will be an occasional exception. We'll get into that later. Then we get 2 first level spell selections. The first one we'll take is Armor of Agathis. Like with my last build, Armor of Agathis, when we're sharing spells with a mount, is really, really good. And it's probably the best Warlock first level spell anyways. It gives us 5 temporary hit points, and when we're hit by an attacker within 5 feet, they take 5 points of cold damage. If we still have any of these temporary hit points left after the attack, then the next attacker takes another 5 points of damage. This is an hour duration and doesn't use concentration. The best part about this spell is the scaling, because both the damage and temporary hit points scale, and by 5 per spell level. And once we get Fine Critter Steed, if we cast this while we're mounted, our mount gets the same benefit. And then the shield spell. If you want to make an optimized character in D&D, you're probably going to want the shield spell. It's one of the best reactions in the game, adding a +5 to armor class until the start of your next turn. It also blocks the magic missile spell. And at first level, we have pretty much the standard Hexblade dip character. 18 charisma, +6 to hit, +4 damage. DPR is 4.5 from the base weapon, +4 for charisma, so that gives us 8.5 per weapon attack, 65% chance to hit, that's 5.3 damage, then 5% to crit, and then that's about 5.5, which is basically the baseline I expect at level 1. If we use Hexblade's Curse, now the damage is 7.28 per round. Okay, so we are going to want extra attack, and we're going to want Fine Greater Steed as soon as possible. So that means Bard. College of Swords is going to be the best choice, though if you wanted to do Valor, that works decently as well. Now I want to start talking about what happens once we get mounted. So I'm just going to add 10 levels in Bard right now. If you want a more detailed breakdown on how this build can be effective at each level before getting Fine Greater Steed, up to this point, this build is going to be very similar to my longsword build I did this spring, so I'll link it up above. Okay, so we're taking the Swords Bard, and that means we'll have 2 ways to use our Bardic Inspiration. The first is the standard way, so it's a bonus action, and we choose one creature, and they can use it to add a die to an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw. They can also use it, as of Tasha's, to add to the healing or damage of a spell. The ally has up to 10 minutes to use the inspiration before it's lost. The nicest thing about Bardic Inspiration is you can add it after the initial roll is made, so we can take a failure and then turn it into a success. The second way we can use it is the Blade Flourish. Firstly, if we take the attack action on our turn, our speed increases by 10 feet until the end of our turn. Then, if we hit a creature with our attack action, we can expend a Bardic Inspiration as part of that attack action to do extra damage equal to the Bardic Inspiration die and get a secondary effect. The big one is Defensive Flourish. This adds the die result to our armor class, and that lasts until our next turn. Defensive Flourish plus the shield spell makes it really hard for anything to hit you. However we use Bardic Inspiration, we have a number of uses equal to our Charisma modifier, so that's 4 right off the bat, and they're recovered on a long rest. Once we hit level 5 in Bard, then we get them back every short rest as well. We're going to get a Fighting Style, and we'll grab Dueling. That's +2 damage with our weapon, including a lance, once we become a mounted character. Jack of all Trades allows us to add half our proficiency bonus rounded down to any ability check we aren't already adding our proficiency bonus to. This includes initiative rolls and counterspell or dispel magic checks. Song of Rest allows us and our companions to get a little extra healing when we expand hit dice to recover hit points during a short rest. This starts at a d6 and it scales with our level. Now I am not sure why this scales separately from our Bardic Inspiration die, but ultimately they both start at a d6 and eventually scale up to a d12. At both 3rd and 10th level in Bard, we're going to get expertise in 2 skills we're proficient in. That gives us twice our proficiency bonus for those skill checks. I've taken Perception and Insight at level 3, and I've taken Deception and Stealth at level 10. Level 6 in Bard we get Counter Charm, which honestly isn't very good, but it uses our action and provides advantage to ourselves and our allies on saving throws against being charmed or frightened for a round. Extra attack is also gained at 6 levels in Bard, and it is really good. So this is gained at 7th level overall, so make sure to use Green Flame Blade at levels 5 and 6 to do a bit of extra damage at those levels, unless we're using a Blade Flourish, in which case you have to take the attack action. Once we get to level 7, then we're probably not using Green Flame Blade anymore anyways. So we're going to have 2 ability score improvements at levels 4 and 8 in Bard. The first one we're going to take is Resilient Constitution. This build is going to be concentrating on spells, and there's no Paladin boost to our saving throws this time. So Resilient Con really works here. We had a 15 Constitution before, so that bumps it up to a nice solid 16. Then at level 8 in Bard, we're going to get our mounted combatant feat. Attacks against our mount we can redirect to ourselves, and our mount basically gets the equivalent of a monk or rogue's evasion feature. And when we make a melee attack against an unmounted creature smaller than our mount, we have advantage on the attack roll. And then at level 10 in Bard, which is level 11 overall, we get Magical Secrets. This allows us to select 2 spells known of up to 5th level from any class spell list. Obviously, our first pick is Find Greater Steed, so we're going to get this 2 levels earlier than a paladin would. We cast a spell and summon a celestial, fey, or fiendish spirit that takes the form of a griffin, pegasus, periton, direwolf, rhinoceros, or saber-toothed tiger. We can communicate with the spirit telepathically, and if the form isn't already intelligent, it has a minimum intelligence of 6. The mount lasts until it falls to 0 hit points, or it's dismissed as an action. If we cast a spell again, we resummon the same mount, except it has all its hit points restored and any conditions removed. And most importantly, well mounted, any spell we cast that targets only us also targets our mount. So first off, which of these forms should we choose? I think it comes down to the Pegasus and the Griffin. They have the most hit points, they're both large-sized, and they can both fly with pretty good speeds. If we compare stats point for point, the Pegasus is a bit faster, it has better saving throws, it's more intelligent, but the Griffin gets an extra attack. But, and I talked about this in my lead-up video last week, there may be some advantages to the Griffin over the Pegasus that isn't covered in the stat block. A Pegasus has hooves, a Griffin has talons and claws. I would assume a Pegasus might have difficulty with stairs. I would also assume a Griffin wouldn't. Now, maybe a Pegasus can fly up or down the stairs. Can a Pegasus fly in a 5-foot hallway when it's squeezing? I think you better check with your DM. The rules don't say it can't, but as I've mentioned before, the rules don't say I can't doesn't necessarily mean you can. What makes sense does matter. I mean, a Griffin can potentially hold things in its talons as well. That could also be helpful. I think the decision will largely come down to your table, but the short of it is, both mounts are good choices. I'm going to recommend controlling the mount in combat, which means it can't make attacks. Mainly this is because our mount's attacks aren't magical, so a lot of creatures will be immune or resistant anyways, and by controlling our mount, coordinating movement and actions is easier. Or, what I should say to be accurate is, I'm recommending controlling the mount for now, because that is going to change later on. Okay, let's move to our second magical secret selection. My recommendation here is Counterspell. I think Counterspell is just too important to ignore. When a creature attempts to cast a spell within 60 feet, we can use our reaction to make that spell fail. If it's 4th level or higher, we need to make a Charisma ability check equal to 10 plus the spell's level, and our Jack of all trades feature adds to the check. Okay, so let's look at the spell selection for Bard. Okay, so I'm just going to briefly mention that these are the cantrips I selected. Mage Hand, Mending, Minor Illusion, and Prestidigitation. Mostly, it's just utility or fun stuff, but feel free to change these up. None of these are really all that important to the build. Alright, so let's look at our leveled spell selections. Keep in mind this character already has Shield, Armor of Agathis, Misty Step, Bless, Find Greater Steed, and Counterspell. Alright, so adding to that, we have Featherfall. I don't think I need to explain why we're taking this. Heroism. We can share this spell with our mount, and it gives us both immunity to the Frightened condition and some replenishing temporary hit points. Aid. This allows us to select 3 creatures and provide them an increase to their maximum hit points, as well as their current hit points. The scaling here, it's really good, with 5 extra hit points for every additional spell slot level. Enlarge Reduce. This is our advantage insurance policy. If we're facing large-sized creatures, we can cast Enlarge Reduce on ourselves and share the spell with our mount. We get a bit of a damage boost, and we become large-sized, and our mount becomes huge-sized, so now we can use Mounted Combatant to get advantage against those large creatures. Lesser Restoration. We remove the blinded, deafened, paralyzed, or poison condition from an ally. Dispel Magic. Remove any spell of 3rd level or lower on the target, which is a creature, object, or magical effect. Any spell of 4th level or higher might also be removed with the same check as Counterspell. And like with Counterspell, we get Jack of all trades added to our check. The Fear Spell. So this uses concentration and affects all creatures in a 30-foot cone. If they fail their wisdom saving throw, they're frightened. But more than that, they need to use their action to dash away from us. They don't get another saving throw until they're in a position where they can't see us anymore. This is a really powerful control spell. Dimension Door is a handy spell allowing 500 feet of teleportation, and we can bring along a willing creature of our size or smaller. Or, if we don't do that, then we're just targeting ourselves with the spell, and then it's shared with our Steed. So we have a bit of a loophole there that allows us to teleport with a larger creature. Freedom of Movement is a 1 hour duration non-concentration spell. We can cast this on ourselves, and then we can't be paralyzed or restrained by magical effects, as well as some other goodies. This is a shared spell, so our mount will benefit from it as well. Polymorph, very useful and powerful 4th level spell. Now technically speaking, if we do cast this on ourselves, it would share with our mount, but I don't think we normally would want to do that. We're just taking Polymorph here for standard use. Turn enemies into snails, turn allies into giant apes. Animate objects, this is straight out damage. Usually 10 silver coins are used, so potentially we can circumvent some resistances, but it uses our concentration, gives us 10 attacks per turn using our bonus action. The bonus to hit is solid, and the damage adds up fast. The main issue with animate objects is usually the reduced damage due to the resistance of non-magical weapons. Still, even in those cases, we're still talking probably just about 20 extra damage per round. And finally, Synaptic Static. This is one of the few debuffs in the game that doesn't use concentration, and it does damage, and it has an intelligence saving throw. Really solid spell. And we are a solid spellcaster here, with spells like Fear and Synaptic Static, but we're also a solid mounted character. I'm going to assume a Pegasus mount, so we'll have 90-foot fly speed and some nice spells to share. I would expect advantage most of the time, though this might use up our first round of combat setting up an enlarge reduce spell if the enemies are large sized. And at this level, I'm liking a 4th level Armor of Agathis and 4th level Aid spell as precastings. That's going to give a 59 hit point mount, 94 effective hit points. That on top of Mounted Combatant leave our mount pretty safe, and we have a lot of fixes for other issues like frightened, paralyzed, or restrained conditions. And our strategy in combat? Well, if we're going to have advantage, then I'd be making lance attacks. But if we're not going to have advantage, I would probably cast Fear or Polymorph or something like that. Lance hits without advantage are recreation or fill in the gaps kinds of actions. However, if we do have advantage, then it's 10.5 per hit with an 80% chance of hitting and extra attack. Add in 4 Blade Flourishes per short rest, add a Hexblade's Curse per short rest, maybe 1 Animate Objects per long rest, maybe 1 Armor of Agathis 20 hit point damage per combat. Well, let's add that all up. So we got 10.5 times 80% times 2, that's 16.8 from attacks. Then 6.5 times 5% times 2, that's 0.65 from critical hits. Then we got 4 times 5.5 divided by 16, that's 1.38 from Blade Flourishes. And then if we take our proficiency bonus times 2 times our chance to hit, and then we add in our crit chance times our extra crit damage times 2, and then we divide by 4, and will give us our Hexblade Curse damage, which is 1.76. And then 20 damage divided by 4 rounds into combat, that's 5 from Armor of Agathis. Then we have 6.5 average damage times 10 animated objects times 55% chance to hit, and then a 5% chance to crit times 10 animated objects plus 2.5 extra critical hit damage, divided by 8 because we probably only do it once. That's 4.63 from animated objects. That adds up to 30.22 DPR, which is 14% over baseline. So that's not bad damage, but we've just mounted up. We're going to make it a lot better. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding 4 levels in Bard. That will bring us to 15th level overall. And so we're going to be able to select 6th and 7th level spells, and we're going to select 2 of them as Bard spells. And these are really easy. For 6th level, we'll grab Mass Suggestion because, of course, we will. No concentration, 1 action to cast, affects up to 12 enemies with 60-foot range, 24-hour duration. It's amazing. And our 7th level spell is Force Cage because, of course, we will. No concentration, 1 action to cast, 1 hour duration, and the creature you trap doesn't get a saving throw until they try to teleport out. If they can't teleport, well, that's it. At 12th level, we're going to get an ability score improvement, and we're going to want Warcaster. Advantage on concentration saves is about to become really important, and now there's no worries about wearing a shield. Our armor class is about to get wacky. At 14th level, we get Master's Flourish, allowing us to use a Blade Flourish whenever we take the attack action without expending Bardic Inspiration. This is really nice. It's just a d6, but one hit, and then that's a d6 to our armor class every round. Basically, that's an average of 3 to 4 added armor class all the time. Add half plate and a shield, and now we're up to 22 or 23. Add a shield spell for 27 or 28. We have some spells that we might cast that are going to get us in that 30 range. And that's without any magical items. Now it's time for our 14th level magical secrets. Here's where we're going to have some fun. So first up, Tasha's Otherworldly Guise. This is a bonus action casting, 6th level spell. Lasts up to 1 minute using our concentration. We choose to draw on the magic of the upper or lower planes, and we transform. We gain immunity to fire and poison damage, or radiant and necrotic, based on our choice. We gain immunity to the poison condition or the charm condition. Spectral wings give us a 40-foot fly speed. We get a +2 to armor class. Now we're up in that 30 range. All of our weapon attacks are magical, and we use charisma for our attacks, which we were using already. And we can attack twice instead of once, but we already had extra attack. But you know what comes next. We share this spell with our Pegasus. It's time to let our mount become uncontrolled. Our Pegasus now attacks twice on their turn. Those attacks are now magical, and they gain the multiple immunities as well as we do. So that's pretty good. It's going to add a fair bit to our damage. It also gives us significant defense. But it's pretty expensive. We're talking about a 6th level spell, and it's probably going to last 1 combat. So maybe we want to go even further. And I'm about to do something I almost never do. Our second magical secret selection is Tensor's Transformation. This is a 1-action cast, but with a 10-minute duration, we should be able to cast it out of combat and can probably get multiple combats out of it. Play your cards right, it might even get you through to your next short rest. We get 50 temporary hit points. Our Pegasus gets 50 temporary hit points. We have advantage on our attacks with simpler martial weapons. Now, you can talk to your DM, but technically speaking, hooves are not simple or martial weapons, so your Pegasus shouldn't have advantage on their attacks. When we hit a target with an attack, it takes an additional 2d12 force damage, and that will include the Pegasus attacks. Proficiency in Strength and Constitution saving throws, and our Pegasus will be making 2 attacks instead of 1. I figure if we want to be a controller, Force Cage and Mass Suggestion are a great way to do that. But if we want to be a Lancer, then Tensors is probably our standard, with Tasha's Otherworldly Guise as a backup in those cases where the immunities are relevant. But make sure to cast that aid spell and freedom of movement before you cast the Tensors. Once Tensors is up, we don't care about enemy size anymore. The advantage is built in. And what happens to our damage? Well, now our base damage, 23.5 times 80% chance to hit, times 2, that's 37.6 from attacks. Then we have 19.5 extra damage on a crit, times 10% chance of critting, times 2 attacks. That's 3.9 more from critical hits. Then we have 3.5 average on a d6, times 96% chance to hit at least once on our turn. That's 3.36 additional damage from blade flourishes. And remember, those are no longer costing us any resources, so we will be handing out our inspiration as a normal bard in addition to this, and our bonus actions are going to be free to do that. Then for Hexblade Curse, proficiency bonus times 2 times chance to hit. Then our increased chance to crit times our additional crit damage times 2 divided by 4. We would expect 2.98 from Hexblade's Curse. And yes, we can use Hexblade's Curse while using Tensor's Transformation. That gives us a total damage from our character of 45.4, but the Pegasus is going to do damage as well. Now, I would assume that the average creature we're going to fight is resistant to our regular damage. Of course, not to the force damage. So that means with that resistance, the average damage on an attack is 18.5, 40% chance to hit, times 2, that's 14.8, and then additional crit damage times chance to crit times 2, another 1.65. Add this all together, and our total DPR is 64.29 at level 15. What's our baseline at level 15? 26.55. That means we are 142% over baseline. I should mention, if you really want to go crazy on damage, get Polar Master and use a glaive or halberd, or even a spear. A bonus action attack boosts that damage even more. You'll have to decide what feat you're going to give up to get it though. Personally, this is the way I would go. And I kind of think this is a good place for us to wrap this up. If I'm adding more levels, I think I'm just going straight Bard. That way we get the 9th level spells and another ability score increase. True Polymorph is a good spell to share with your mount. Foresight also isn't a bad selection. We would get another magical secrets. We might want Shape Change. We might want Wish. We might want Mass Heal. And for that feat, we might want Metamagic Adept. Maybe pick up Subtle Spell or Quicken Spell. Both of those could be useful. And yeah, that's how to focus on the Fine Greater Steed spell. This one is giving you maximum maneuverability. We can cast Fly on a Fine Steed Warhorse, but giving it flight without concentration probably means we're going to need to get lucky with magic items. With Fine Greater Steed, it's built right in. In addition, we're building in another 40 hit points. However, if Fine Greater Steed is going to be your focus, just be aware, it's a lot longer wait for your character to become mounted. So this completes my mini-series looking at builds where being mounted is the focus. Hope you found it interesting, and maybe found some inspiration for your next mounted character. Otherwise, until next time, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks everybody, talk to you soon.